Welcome to a special edition of Doug and Friends. Here's Doug.
Hi.
Here's some friends. Joined this time by Dr. Ben Merkel, Dr. Jared Longshore, and I'm Joe Rigney. And we're here to talk about institutional capture and the craziness on our college campuses. So why would we be talking about this, guys? Any particular reason?
It has to do with the behavior of my grandson.
Yeah, that's right. Getting in good trouble again, huh?
He got into some good trouble maybe a day and a half ago, middle of the night last night.
Okay.
And there was a mob trying to take over Hamilton Hall at Columbia, and Rory was awakened by some of his friends. He was asleep, and he went down there, and he and a friend, Charles, took their place in front of the door to keep the mob from occupying the building. And there was some footage of it that went viral. That's basically what happened.
Okay. So another Wilson went viral.
Another Wilson went viral. Nancy with the spanking.
And now Rory with the
yes. And they keep
defiance.
getting rewarded.
I know. That's right. Start with this question. I think some people are probably surprised that Doug Wilson's grandson goes to Columbia University, partly because we talk a lot about classical Christian education. We talk a lot about Big Ed. So we've done advertisements here at New St. Andrews about Big Ed and the problem of it. We talk about Leviathan State University, and yet your grandson is at Leviathan State University. So give us some thoughts on that.
To be precise, the land-grant universities are what I think of as Leviathan State or Behemoth State.
Okay.
Columbia is one of the Ivies, just as corrupt and even more polished, and lots of problems there. I think it's a really reasonable question. Rory went K through 12 at Logos School, and he did a year at New St. Andrews here. And while he was a student at New St. Andrews, that's when he had his first round with masked bullies,
Right.
which was the city of Moscow.
Yeah.
And the court case from that is now before the Idaho Court of Appeals. That's been years. So he did a year at NSA, and then he went to Columbia in order to fight dragons. He was Nate and Heather, and he thought he needed to get out there and engage, and has been doing a faithful job of it. So that's basically the reason. It's not a slight or a slam on NSA. He went there for a year, but he thought he was ready to tackle the bad guys.
And would this be an example of, in general, this is sort of an exceptional case in terms of it's a certain kind of kid that you feel like you can launch into a hive of villainy like that and be okay, as opposed to sort of the normal expectation.
Yes.
Is that how you think about that?
Yes, very much so. And one of the things that it's when you do something like that, it's going to be tentative. It wasn't like, goodbye, I'm leaving. Right. It's okay, we'll see if I'm ready for this. Mm-hmm. And so the whole point of a classical Christian education is to equip the students to engage the world and engage culture. And it's fine to do that if you're ready to do that. Mm-hmm. The problem with a lot of kids, and with most kids, is that they go to Behemoth State University or Leviathan State or one of the Ivies, and they're academically up for it, but they're not up for the digestive system of the world that will just consume them.
Right.
And Rory you may have seen in the video, if you've seen the video, he's got a stubbornness to him.
Yeah. Where'd that come from? Any particular source?
Must be Nancy.
I coached Rory in lacrosse for a number of years. I was his high school lacrosse coach and always played him at defense. And I look at Rory at that door and like, you're not going to move him. I mean, like, that's the one thing I know that Rory is pretty excellent at.
He doesn't budge easily.
Yeah, I think Nate was talking about it as working out the contramundum muscles.
Yeah.
So maybe talk about that. Like, why is it important to have those muscles?
Well, because whether or not you go to engage with the world, at some point in the very near future, the world's going to come to engage with you, and you don't want to be caught flat-footed when it happens. You want scouts going out ahead of your main force. You want to know what they're like. You want to know what they're doing. You want people who are ready, and you want people who are ready for that.
Right. Not just sitting back and watching. Do you guys have any thoughts after you watched the video?
Oh yeah, I had many thoughts, but one was emotional self-control. Maybe somebody should read this book by
That's right.
Joe Rigney on emotional sabotage, because Roy's standing there, and while all of Gen Z gut sobs around him, he's just calm.
Yeah.
He's not even. He doesn't even seem a bit bent out of shape. I know there's stories about, I think, dragonflies landing on Rory at church on Sunday when he's in town. He just is very quiet and just walks around, maybe talks to the old ladies.
Yeah.
Like he has that kind of demeanor, which is exactly the kind of thing you need when you're going to stand up against a mob. I think there's even a moment where you can just see, like, while they're coming and trying to peel off his buddy, Rory's just perfectly calm, steady, and it's like, man, of course you have the kind of guy that would never show up, and you want to fix that problem. But then, of course, you have the kind of guy that's going to show up and be bombastic. Here's my great opportunity. You don't want to miss on that side either. And Rory really demonstrated for everybody how to just stand there and say, "I'm a student. I can stand here." I tweeted, "I'm interested to know when Colombia is holding the event where they're going to hang medals on these two guys' necks."
Yeah, right.
Because I want to put it in my calendar and get the plane tickets ready. Since you had two men that were very peacefully protecting your property,
Yeah.
How can anyone argue against what Rory was doing in that moment? It was a great deal.
Yeah.
I think in education, one of the critiques that we often have with parents who send their kids off to the public school is they do it under this they pretend that we're sending them as missionaries so they can go and change the institution, whatever. And it's a farce because no institution is changed by them, and what ends up is their kids become heathens because of it. They lose their kids. But they're lying to themselves about the impact their kids will have on the school. And I think that is a real problem with sending your kids off to the public schools. But there is a converse temptation that we need, or a mistake that we need to look out for, which is giving them this education and building them up, and then not sending them out to do something with it. Like we actually do want our kids to have an impact on the world. If you're lying to yourself about, well, I'm sending them out there so they can have an impact on the world, but actually all it is you want them to be a part of certain favored institutions, I think that's a problem. But if you legitimately are preparing them, they're built with a worldview, and they're ready, then they need to be deployed. They need to go. I think Rory is exceptional. I would say, when it comes to when I'm giving my NSA pitch, I'm always really careful. I think that's in almost every single pitch I've ever given, where I always say NSA is not for everyone. I think particularly when it comes to college, you should really be suspicious and beware of anybody who has a one-size-fits-all advice for here's what you do for college. That's somebody that's selling you something, and I think you always need to look out for that. So I think you have to tune, particularly at the college level, your advice to the person. I would say even at the undergraduate level, most kids are not ready for it. They would get gobbled up by the institution, and we have all the data, I think, to show for it. But I don't think that we should be scared of those kinds of institutions. I did Oxford for grad school. I think that swinging for the top and not being scared and going after it is really good, but you have to have an honest assessment of yourself, where you're ready for it. I remember early on at Oxford coming home to Becca and telling her, if I'd gone here as an undergraduate, I don't think I would have made it because of the institution where I was ready as a grad student. I was married, had 5 kids, and was already an elder at Christ Church. So I had a gravitas when I got there that wasn't moving. I think Rory's pretty exceptional in that he clearly has that gravitas at the undergraduate level. I mean, and so if somebody's looking at that saying, see, that's proof that it's fine to send my kid off to Ivy Leagues and whatever, absolutely. If your kid has the kind of staying power to stand at that moment and be that, that's pretty great, but that's pretty exceptional.
Right.
I still remember during COVID, Moscow was under this mask order, and there was this farce where if you're walking down the street, you had to stand 6 feet apart. once you went in, you were fine. They didn't care. It was when you're outdoors that for some reason you had to be 6 feet apart. So my daughter is walking with Rory because they were in a Hebrew class. This is when he was at NSA, and they're walking back, and police officers pull up in a squad car. And my daughter is like, okay, this is it. We're in for it. And, she knows I'm with Rory. So we're
really in for
it. So the cops get out, they walk up to him, and my daughter pulls out her phone and films it all. So I've got all the footage and watch this. And the police say, if you're aware of this ordinance, that requires you stand 6 feet apart. And Rory just cheerfully, with all of the good nature you're describing, says, yes, and I'm in principal defiance of it. and then they get about a 15 to 20 minute conversation of them saying, we need you to step apart. And I'm saying, I understand. This must be difficult for you. You have a tough job today, but it really is a nonsense order. I'm just not going to do it. But it was just really respectful conversation. It ends with the police saying to the two of them, we're going to get back in the car. We're going to drive around the block. And if you haven't separated, it's a misdemeanor and it's going to be serious.
We're going to write you up.
Yeah. And they said, okay, we'll wait. And they did this. Cops got back in the car, drove off, and never came back. So I say, I've seen Rory over the years. He can handle this just fine. It doesn't change any of my critique of other schools.
Sure.
But he's ready for this and doing quite well.
Yeah. What if we step back and think about just higher ed in general? Why does this thing concentrate? Why is that so prevalent on college campuses? And this isn't just like a recent in the last 9 months. Obviously, it's there, but it's kind of historically been there. Back in the 60s, it was there. There's just kind of what is it about college campuses that lend itself to this kind of behavior?
Well, if you're talking, there's two behaviors going on.
Right.
There's the students, the protesters, and then there's the administration. And I think the behavior of the administration, Columbia here, the admin at Columbia is a prime example of it, fits right in with Robert Conquest's third law of politics. He's got 3 famous laws. But the third law of politics is the behavior of any bureaucratic organization is best explained by assuming that it is run by a secret cabal of its enemies. Right? Yeah. Bureaucracies don't know how to defend themselves. They don't know how to. They are just. They know how to do the next thing. The bureaucrat wants to get the papers from this side of the desk to that side of the desk. He doesn't want to get in trouble with his superior. It's just he wants smooth systems, and protesters come in to disrupt the system. And as soon as they put a gun to the head of your precious orderly system, they've got you, right? And the bureaucrats don't know what to do. They don't think like generals or admirals. They think like bureaucrats. So, and this happened in the 60s. They're basically liberal administrators of college campuses didn't know what to do with all the students who believed everything that they'd been taught at that university, put it into practice, and then staged a sit-in at the admin building. And the administrators didn't know what to do. And the same thing is happening here. Right. So what Rory and is it Charles, the other guy, were trying to do is they were trying to hold the door until security or the cops came. Right. They knew that they...
And they weren't ever going to come.
and they weren't going to come. And when it became apparent that they weren't going to come, okay, the university wants it to be overrun. Well, the Columbia admin is behaving suicidally. And the protesters are following the classic Maoist cultural revolution. They see weakness, they smell weakness, and they exploit it. They go for it. And they don't know what to do when they run into even a little tiny bit of courage, right? Because if you look at the mob that was there, they could have bustled Rory and Charles off.
Yeah, really quickly.
They just needed 15 of them to. But they were pushing and shoving and jockeying because they didn't know. The thing that they couldn't deal with was the no. Let me think about it. I'm not going to let you do this. That was the thing that their strategy doesn't work on. Right. A feckless administrator, Oh,
they know how to run that game.
Your comment about the bureaucrat simply wanting to move papers, not wanting to get in trouble with a superior, that kind of thing, brought to mind what you said recently on Tucker. If there's no God above the state, then the state becomes God. If there's no God above the institution, then the institution becomes God. And so I always have to look to the policy and procedures manual to know how to navigate this issue. And the radical leftists paid attention to it, and they knew that if we squeeze by with our knuckles closed and we pick off Rory's friend, not touching, can't get mad, that, then the administration, they can't do anything because the policy and procedures manual says that my hand would have to be open, for it to be assault or whatever.
3 kids in the back seat. I'm not touching you.
That's right.
I know. I'm like, you're watching this. Like, I've seen this kind of thing before. It's reminded me of, but people in general, they would rather just go, okay, let me not get in trouble and let me honor the system, period, without looking to God, rather than that risk of going, no, what is justice here? There is a living God, and I'm going to do it, right? And I'll be mindful of what the commitments of this institution are, but they're not ultimate commitments. The ultimate commitment is to the Lord. But that's an actual leader. You're going to have to make decisions at that moment, and you're dealing with an ossified situation. I mean, they made all the decisions were years and years ago when the dean didn't say, by the way, we're going to frog march you out of this school because you're wearing pink hair or whatever it is. Like you didn't draw the line there. It reminds me of the story that you told. So when you were the dean, and well, I hope if this isn't live, we'll have to cut it. I don't know if the parties are involved, but there was you said 2 guys wanted to have a fight, or 2 guys came to you asking if they could fight. And I remember you telling this story, and I'm thinking how I'd play that if I was dean. And to my shame, I was thinking I'd probably try to get them not to fight. But you picked up on the fact that they were really trying to get out of fighting by asking authority if they could fight.
They were trying to find somebody to say you can't have
to
the
which
fight.
you looked at them and responded, "Yeah, definitely go fight."
Go. I went outside in the hall and got a guy to be ref. Let's go get this done.
You need some leadership intuition like that to keep these organizations going right.
And if I could piggyback on what you just said about they're following the processes and the system is God. Well, the protesters are following Saul Alinsky, making the administration follow their own rules, and are being antinomian with regard to those rules themselves. And the bureaucrat doesn't know what to do with an antinomian, right? Who just ignores all that. There's no policy in place for what to do when there is no policy.
I think the thing is there are actually very few people that are legitimately true people of conviction on either side. Most of the people in that moment there are, I think, people who are waiting. They're trying to detect the mojo and which way the mojo is going, and at the moment the mojo. Well, think of it this way: if we were to go back 2 or 3 years, and fling the accusation of somebody being anti-Semitic. 2 years ago, that was like one of the worst things that you could be. Suddenly now, that's at the very center of the Overton window, and it's just this little moment where the mojo shifts, and now all of a sudden, last week, I don't know if you know this, the Department of Education opened an investigation on Columbia University for fear of their anti-Arab and anti-Muslim stance. 2 anti-Islamic, and they are under investigation right now for.
That's why nobody came for Rory.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. Like if you were 2 or 3 years ago, the mojo was in a completely different spot. You can feel it shift. And everybody is because they don't have a transcendent standard. They don't have a true objective standard. That means they can't be people of true conviction, because you're just trying to pick which way things are going. Because right now
they're surfing.
Yeah.
Where's the wave?
Yeah, exactly. No, that's exactly what it is. They're surfing a wave, and I think that if you try to do the exact same thing that they were doing for Hamas, if you tried to do that for the KKK, there's no way the administration would be using the kid gloves that they're using. Like right now, the administration, you see them and they're doing the thing of the parent in the grocery store that counts to 10 and then to 20 and then to 100. Right. And they're never going to do anything because they're scared of the kid and they're not actually going to do anything.
But they'll do something. They'll move from numbers and math into fractions.
Yeah.
9.5, 9 3/4.
Once you hang 3 Antifada signs from the building, we're coming.
The rookie mistake of counting down. You should count up so you don't get trapped by that. But I think that they're all just trying to read the mojo, and it just shifts in a moment, and they're all going to pivot. But there is kind of a cluelessness because you can tell they're all a little bit of a finger in the air trying to figure out which way does this go? Because there are plenty of groups right now that would not get that kind of patient treatment where to
look
take
at
over.
The J6 protesters.
Yeah, exactly.
They just drop the hand. They know how to play. They know how to play hardball.
They know where the tear gas is. They know where the tasers are. They could break all out in a second. They're getting this treatment because right now they think this is the future, and so they need to not stand in the way of it because they don't want to be caught being on the wrong side of the history. Yeah.
Do you think so? Is there a sense in which, so like on one level, you can say you reap what you sow. These universities are reaping what they sow. But is there a sense in which some of the administrators are actually, because of their sympathy, is it because of the sympathies with the cause? Like, in other words, they're sympathetic to what the students want, and so they just don't.
I think they're trying to anticipate which cause they're supposed to have been sympathetic to.
That's right.
10 years from now.
So some of the junior faculty are definitely already in.
Yeah.
But they're the junior faculty,
right? And it's the revolution. The revolution will eat them last, right? So there's layers there. It strikes me that that concept, in thinking about what you said about this is Rory's second run in with mass bullies. And the story about walking down the street here, that the kind of anarcho-tyranny concept is a kind of useful one here. Mm-hmm. So this is like that concept that the state passes a massive amount of laws, which they only enforce selectively on law-abiding citizens, right? So you better mask up, you better not be 6 feet apart, and we'll drop a hammer if you put a sticker on the pole next to all the other stickers that we've not done anything about. Mm-hmm. But we can get you for that. For that thing.
What happens to an armed burglar, for example? He gets a wrist slap. What happens to the homeowner who shoots the armed burglar?
Right.
Well, the book gets thrown at him. We have to.
Well, going back to Moscow, just right before that, we'd had the George Floyd protest in Friendship Square.
Yeah.
No mask, no social distancing.
It was all fine, right?
We're not going to do anything.
And so that's the anarcho part of it. So it's the anarcho part is what we got to pass laws to deal with these really complex situations, which never get used on those situations, but instead get wielded against lawful citizens as a form of tyranny. Right?
Two cousins walking back from Hebrew class.
Exactly.
We got to get that.
They'll get the book thrown at them.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting just to watch the full circle there that Rory kind of went through. Is he's had the run in with the anarcho and the tyranny on both sides.
The mob and the cops.
Yeah. Is there one of the things that it strikes me, like, so in that essay where that comes from a Sam Francis essay from back in the day, and in it he talks about one of the things that enables it is managed pacification. You basically, everybody gets used to just kind of sitting back, which is kind of what I think when you watch the video. There's a whole bunch of people there. There's the agitators, and there's just a whole bunch of people there with their phones
out,
who are just sort of spectators, which is just an interesting dynamic involved in the whole thing, because like what you said, they're just journalists. Had it gotten violent, would they have done anything? And the answer is no. They would have filmed it, right? And they would have posted. I was right there, and they would have had their 15 minutes for being right there. But there's just sort of a passivity that we get used to whenever it's tyranny, anarcho-tyranny, back and forth, where you don't know what to do. You just sit back. Which is why I think the stand. So this is one of the things that kind of came out of this. The criticism was, why would a conservative Christian defend a rotten institution that is opposed to everything that we care about? That it's reaping what it's sown. Let the floods sweep it away. Just let it go. Why stand in front of a building? The administration clearly doesn't care about the building. The cops don't care about the building. Why would we be the ones to rush to its defense?
Yeah. So the answer to that is that Rory and his friend were not defending the building primarily. That was the occasion of their defense. But what they were defending was the rule of law. What the stand they were taking was anti-mob. Okay,
Right.
mobs are not going to do good for anybody. And so every opportunity we have to say no to a mob, we should say no to a mob. So it was a stand not for Hamilton Hall, but a stand for the rule of law, which is what conservatives stand for.
Right.
And there's a passage, and I don't have it verbatim, but in the Old Testament, if you see your enemy's donkey laden down, collapsed under a weight, it says, "You shall help him." Right.
Yeah.
There are certain situations where you're supposed to set your dispute aside because there's a higher principle that you are defending. So stepping in to defend a building full of liberals who are not as hardcore as the liberals leftists who are attacking it. It's not you're not defending one leftist group against another leftist group. You're defending peace. You're defending
Right.
You're defending the rule of law.
Right.
There's something, and this is like kind of a detriment of any kind of visual, audio, media, or Twitter age. You watch that; it sounds like that's the kind of critique that someone does who watched this on a screen, and you're almost getting inhuman. Like Rory just did a human thing. If you're in a building and you find out, or if you're near and you find out people are like throwing bricks through windows, or whatever, beating it up the way they were, particularly if it's the weird kind where you go, like, they're out there chanting and they're all going to do this, to actually say, I'm going to meet, this is where I am, I'm going to go do something about this problem. On the right, the danger of becoming passive is you talk about the intellectual problems, and I'm going to choose my battle and I'm not going to take that battle. Now, I think you need to count the cost and choose your battles. But you can be the kind of person who makes a mistake where a guy's getting mugged and you're like, well, I'm going to choose my battle, right? Because if I were to step in, who knows, I might get shot. And I've got a board meeting. I've got an important thing I got to get to.
I've got a temple to get to.
I've got exactly.
The priest and the Levite both didn't want to risk becoming unclean by touching a dead body.
That's a huge danger for conservatives right now. As you actually have to, no, I'm going to actually be a human right now and do something that's remarkably human and practical given the situation.
I think we also, conservative evangelical Christians, we've gotten way too accustomed to considering institutions as disposable, and we've gotten too used to walking away and saying, "Oh, it's another institution that's gone down. Now it's gone liberal." I think that in the next couple of decades, what we need to get good at is standing and fighting and retaking institutions. Now, Rory's stand at that door probably isn't going to move Colombia, but I think there's something very symbolic about that kind of positioning that is really a vision for what we ought to be doing, what evangelical leadership should be aiming for over the next couple of decades.
Right.
Yeah. What you're saying there is that we must not imitate the failure of Denethor, who collapsed and gave up far too soon. Gondor was corrupt.
Yep.
They weren't ready for the fight. He knew they weren't ready for the fight, and he gave up and missed a glorious eucatastrophe because he quit too soon.
Right.
And what we need to understand is that if we believe in Christian nationalism, it's not like we're going to bulldoze North America and build new institutions from scratch, coast to coast. That's not going to happen. If there's going to be a Christian nation at all, there's going to be quite a few refurbished institutions, recovered institutions.
Right. Well, and as part of reading the story you're in, there is an element like the symbolic element. So you're weighing out: is this the most prudent battlefield to fight on, to go down and defend the dean's office when he doesn't want to defend it? So are you supposed to make that calculus as kind of the main thing? Or do you say, this is the contra mundum muscles, I need to work those out. There's a mob. I better go stand in front of it.
So here, these things, these moments, I think this is a highly significant moment. And these sorts of moments are are appointed by God, and they're not scheduled by man.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we can Monday morning quarterback and say, I think that it would have been more propitious if Luther had posted his theses 18 months before, right? Well, he didn't.
Yeah.
And Luther was not doing anything spectacular. He was just posting theses for debate at the community center. Hope you all come. And the Wittenberg door was just the bulletin board. So he posts these theses, and then 3 weeks later, Europe's on fire. And that was God's appointment. It was not anything Luther planned. There was no committee behind it. This is the moment to move. So we tend to think that we are in charge of scheduling these things. And then after the fact, we can say, wouldn't it have been more consistent if we had done the same thing, interposition, when they were tearing down Robert E. Lee's statue, when they were doing the whole statue frenzy thing?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it have been better if thousands of Christians had showed up
and
done
our own little change?
That would have been scheduled by us, and who knows, it might have been great, but it's not God's moment.
And having the conversation about, wouldn't it have been better?
Yeah.
Okay, is manifestly not taking action the way Rory did.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So Monday morning quarterbacking it with your buddies about what you could have done historically, what we did. Let's game plan what we might have done in the future and what we might do next time. All of that is not taking action in the moment.
Yeah.
And conservatives are remarkably good at that kind of thing. Like, well, let's talk about procedures and planning for what needs to be done rather than actually doing something. So how did Colombia get to a place where you could literally have, Antifada hanging from, you could have people climbing into windows, like mass, how'd they get there? Well, they didn't get there. That didn't happen last night, right? You had people that were passive, that didn't fix problems, that didn't take action, that didn't solve things and actually do things. I mean, you get the same thing with the stickers here, right? Are we just going to sit around and let tyranny happen, or are we going to say something? Are we going to do something? And the downfall of the West, like what's happening in our own society, is going to be fixed. Institutions are going to be they're going to get more healthy by actually speaking, acting, doing, not just sitting back and talking about what might have been.
There was a moment in the war between the states when a Yankee soldier, he had a wounded Confederate soldier under his charge, and he asked the Confederate, "Why are you guys fighting so hard?" And the Confederate said, "Because you're here."
Right. Yeah.
Right? So in this situation, why did you go step in front of the mob? Well, I live here. I go to school here, and I don't have to solve problems in China. I don't have to solve problems in South America, but this is happening here, and I should do the human thing. I should do the thing I was trained to do. This vandalism. This is lawless. It's wrong, and so I'm going to try to slow it down or stop it if I can.
Right, and there's a kind of both the qualification aspect, right? So you're qualifying yourself for sort of future leadership by a display of courage in that moment. But there's also the symbolic element, which is, there's a, the hatred towards Christians, toward white guys, white heterosexual males, and then it's that guy who's going to be the one standing in, defiance of the mob, while the feckless cowards have all pulled up their skirts and are hiding somewhere safely in a Manhattan apartment, where they've got security. They're not going to be threatened in any way, and it's just this 20-something-year-old white Christian guy who's going to be the one standing there. There is a sort of symbolic dimension to, well, that's what the Christians are going to do. That's what and Christian and part of I think the value of it is something like, you want a bunch of other just normie people to go, are we allowed to do that?
Are we allowed to say no?
Are we allowed to say no? Are we allowed to just, if the mob comes for us, if the mob comes for the local library, if the mob comes from whatever, do we have to let them burn it down? I remember, during the George Floyd thing in Minnesota, they tore
That
down.
didn't affect you guys,
No,
did it?
not at all. Every gas station within, all the gas stations we used within a few miles of our house were burned down during that deal. But as they were working their way down Lake Street and burning everything, there was a couple of guys who had come in, brought their AR-15s because they knew that the tobacco shop owner or whatever it was, there's a tobacco shop or something, and he had called them. And so they came down and they just stood in front with their AR-15s. It's the only building that didn't get burned down, right? Because they just said, well, I guess nobody's going to do it. It says,
This is the old Koreans on rooftop ploy.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you're just there in the moment in order to for people to go, oh, we don't have to just we don't have to go along with the tyranny, and we don't have to go along with the anarchy. We could do something different.
Now, there are plenty of reasons why people don't, and one was evidenced by, I don't know if you caught this in one of the clips while they're taking Rory's friend away, and he's doing his best to resist as they're kind of moving him. One of the girls is just kind of saying over and over again, don't do anything, it will ruin your whole life. What you do now will ruin your whole life. If you make the wrong mistake right now, you'll ruin your whole life. She knew, this crazy leftist knew. Yeah. And she knows what to say to conservatives, right? Who've worked really hard, who have, right? I mean, she was just in his ear. You could hear it. And I got a friend that used to say, you get this kind of pressure, you get called by the guys that are higher up in the organization, even the good guys, and you're kind of starting to do something like, listen now, I mean, you don't, listen, you're young, you got a lot of road in front of you, you don't want to ruin your career, and he say, well, career, I don't have one of those, so that's all right. So there has to be this courage, this willingness to go, I'm not worrying about credentials, I'm going to do the right thing, right? And with wisdom, if you're young, ask wise men that have displayed courage, but courage requires that you have actually done something. And those threats are going to continue to come as we try to work for renewal, reformation.
I think you have to be careful about the fallacy of resulting, which is the immediate results after, whether they were good or bad, determines whether the action you took was the right one. And this is why I think having that objective, transcendent standard, the result could have been you were burned alive, and it was still the right thing to do. I think this is where we do have to learn to get our eyes up where they're supposed to be, to do what we're supposed to do, and then trust God for the results. That's going to be His determination. And sometimes it's a quiet thing that happens in a corner, and nobody sees it but God. It was just a little act of obedience offered up to Him. And then sometimes out of nowhere, He takes some random little bit of obedience, or maybe obedience mixed with a little bit of stupidity, and it becomes the Boston Tea Party, and then all of a sudden something huge comes from it. So I want to be careful about not that fallacy of resulting. I think that it makes us think that we are capable of planning at a level that we're not really capable of planning,
and turns us into pragmatists.
Yeah,
like I'll do this courageous thing so long as it's safe.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, all this, like coming from administrative leadership at NSA, when I've seen things that all of a sudden that was amazing, something huge came from it, almost invariably I'm like, and I have no idea how it happened.
Right.
And I go back to and here's the thing I planned, and it went nowhere.
Yeah.
I've noticed that it's funny, planning is important and everything, but between planning and really, really good strategy versus just plain being under God's blessing.
Right.
This one tends to, it's got a far higher track record for significant success.
And it was Dwight Eisenhower who said that in war, planning is essential, and in battle, plans are useless.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. The prep and the planning shows good faith, but the result is God's.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and it's sort of, is it Mike Tyson? Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth.
Right.
Right. And there is an element of, so part of what I was, watching Rory do that, just the number of times, say in the book of Acts, where you've got that kind of mob thing happening, and you see the apostles over and over again having to deal with just maintain, it's the cool as a cucumber. I'm steady. God's in control. He's governing this mob. This mob's not actually in control of this. They think they are. They think that this is their show, but it's not. He's telling a different story. And sometimes that means it's Stephen, like you said, right? The martyr, here comes the rocks. And other times, like the time, one of my favorites is the only time that Paul gets flustered, I think, in the book of Acts, is when they tried to worship him. Most of the time, the mobs, he's pretty cool as a cucumber. But, when they came out and were like, it's Hermes and Zeus.
Yeah.
And he's like, are you nuts? Are you
If
crazy?
they'd had rocks in their hands,
Yeah.
he would have known
He
what
would
to
have known what
do.
to do. This one was like, oh no. And there's something there about just the living under the blessing of God. Well, I'm not accepting any of this kind of homage. This is not something I'm in on. But then it's interesting because in that situation, he tells them to knock it off. And then in the next verse, some Jews come from another city who've been his opponents, and they get that same crowd to stone him.
Right.
Just the fickleness of that mob, right? How quickly he went from top of this is a God on earth to we got to stone these guys, and he gets left for dead, and then God raises him up.
But that's something we tend to background. So when we pray for reformation and revival,
Right.
we need to understand we're praying for mobs.
Yeah, right.
Right.
That's right.
That's one of the things that's going to come with it.
Right.
And mobs are all through the book of Acts, and they're also all through the evangelical awakening. You might go into a church library and see volumes that the life of Whitefield and John Wesley and inspirational quotes, but they were dogged with mobs doing awful rocks and dead cats and just throwing all sorts of things at them. And the preachers in the evangelical awakening in England had to preach under conditions like what Rory was in.
Yeah.
That's a good word for institutional effectiveness. To think about what kind of board, like, can you imagine a board trying to meet with the Apostle Paul about what was happening, or Whitefield, or these other guys? Like, if you're on a board, you have a certain duty, but you would want your president, leader of your institution, and then as you go through all the faculty at Columbia, like, you want them all to be free men living free, and the only way you're going to get that is gospel. Right, you don't want them to be puppets that you are constantly controlling, and you don't want them to think that you are the puppeteers. Like, there's authority, there's hierarchy, there's order, but there's freedom and life.
And sometimes the judicious types have a word of wisdom. So when the stadium was full of rioting Ephesians, Paul saw a preaching opportunity.
Yeah, right, yeah,
right,
yeah.
And a couple of his friends who were pagan priests said, and I think that they
maybe had a point.
They had a point,
Yeah.
at least in that circumstance.
But there is an element of, like, so it's basic faithfulness, right? So the quote, the proverb that came to mind when you were talking was, the mind of the man plans his way, the Lord directs his steps. So there, God assumes you're going to plan, right? You're going to make your plans, you're going to build your strategies, you're going to try to build an institution. And then God's going to throw you all kinds of curveballs. And the question is, what kind of person are you when the curveball comes? It's not, did you stick to the plan? Did you stick to the plan? It's what kind, had you been cultivating godliness? Had you been living under the blessing of God? And that's I was teaching our lordship last class, last 2 days, and was talking about build and fight sort of stuff. And was reading through Deuteronomy 6, as a kind of like manifesto for like Christian paideia and enculturation. And the interesting thing there, right, is this is back to the whose stuff is this? Is that when God says to Israel, when you're living under his blessing, when you're keeping the commandments, when you're being careful to do everything that he said, the expectation is that the pagans will build it and you will inherit it.
Yes.
Right? You're gonna get houses you didn't build, vineyards you didn't plant, wells you didn't dig. All of that will be yours. They will do all of that work, and then I'm going to give it to you as a gift. And when I do, don't say, in my right hand and my right arm got me this wealth. Don't take care lest you forget God. Remember that, but it's the blessing of God leads to this unlikely thing where, okay, here they just hand over the keys, right? Or they get run out or whatever, however God does it. So the expectation that these institutions that are so far gone would not, at some point, would be recoverable. And it might not be, like you said, because Rory stood in front of a building, but it might be that, but the people that will inherit it will be like Rory.
Yeah.
The moment, it may not be this moment, but it will be moments like that.
Right. And so we should practice, like, every chance you get. Like, this is, and I think this is one of the harder things, right, is to know when those, what are the little things in the corner that you're talking about? Like, when are those moments of just little faithfulness that are preparing you for the big moment so that you don't flake out?
The other thing to keep in mind is one of the great values of reading the Old Testament is particularly the history of Judah. I'm surprised regularly at how many good kings of Judah there were. You know,
Right.
there were a number of them. But take one of the best, Josiah. He refurbishes the temple, and they discover a manuscript. Probably the book of Deuteronomy.
Right.
And how far gone was it under Josiah's reign when he says, "Wait, we've got a Bible"?
Right. Wait, there's a
Really?
There's a law book?
Really?
Yeah.
And he reads it, and
He's,
I mean,
"Oh,
that was
no."
Judah was down the tubes.
Right.
If they're that far, not only is the temple in disarray, but they've lost also. How did Josiah even know that there could be a reformation?
Right.
But God works anyway.
Yeah.
And so the United States is currently in a very, very bad way. But Chesterton has a wonderful quote that Christianity has died many times, but it's not a problem because we have a God who knows the way out of the grave. And the church has been in as dire or a more dire situation than we are in now many, many times. And there's always been a comeback, and we're going to see one.
Good. Well, this is helpful. I think as we try to as we build and fight, we want to remain faithful. We want to be faithful in the little things, faithful at your post, which is what Rory was attempting to do out in Colombia. And so the challenge for folks who are listening in is find your spot. Where has God placed you? What's in front of you? What's the task? What's the assignment? Be faithful there, and then trust the results.
Where's your post?
Yeah, where's your post? So thanks for listening to Doug and Friends. This has been a great time. We'll be back soon.
That's the life I want. I want to be 70 and have 18 grandchildren. Let's go!
I came from the mud. There's dirt on my hands. Strong like a tree. There's roots where I stand.
I'm Tucker Carlson, and I am here with the very famous and highly controversial Pastor Doug Wilson.
Even more controversial.
Try to catch me howling at the moon.